If somebody has more interest in the issue, how it will evolve, it's a good source. It is this high-level group on own resources chaired by Mario Monti. This group comes with reports. The first report is very good. It's really good and very comprehensive. If you have some more details about how our own resource system evolves, what are the challenges, I would say it's a very good source of knowledge. And as they will evolve, they will also reflect on the expenditure side. So it is easy reading, but it gives you all the time in contact with multi-annual financial framework issues. But multi-annual financial framework does not mean that you still don't need to adopt a yearly budget. And that's definitely is same, more or less the same procedure, but it is more, I would say, more difficult even, because you don't need just to adopt budget, but you also need to move procedure for each amended budget. And for example, for 2013, you have had 9 amended budgets. So basically you have the same struggle 10 times a year. So that's why DG budget is always fully busy. The words that I mentioned, evolving and disputed, we will come to it. The budgetary procedure is in a way similar. It is a Commission prepares annual draft budget, and then European Parliament and Council could amend the draft budget and then adopt the annual EU budget. But the challenge is more pronounced, because it sounds rather simple. There's 2 different procedures in the Council and in the Parliament. At the end of the budgetary procedures, they should come to the same result. So they should agree on commitments and on payments. And the 2014 budget, what happened? Commission made proposal, Council cut it down, Parliament increased it up. So then it's so-called conciliation committee. So the Parliament and Council and Commission sit in the same room, and their Commission could make proposals to facilitate and try to agree on it. It works 21 days, and they failed. But they moved a bit. So what happened next? Commission took away the proposal and made a new proposal that was closer to the compromise that they saw. And surprise, Council and Parliament adopted. But the price was the usual. Increase on commitment compared with Commission proposal, and on payment level it stayed with member countries. So you have a permanent challenge with so-called resta liquide. In colloquium, it's RAL, R-A-L. It basically means outstanding commitments that still you need to cover. And just to give you magnitude of figure, it is at the end of 2014, it is 220 billion. So we have basically potentially bills coming in for 220 billion euro. And unfortunately, this figure is going up. And for the 2015, the challenge is to get it as close as possible, and the gap that I just would mention is DGs made because they have a commitment, they more or less know what payments need to be made to the year. So they said we have needs for 164 billion euro. What is a ceiling? It gives us 22 billion too much. Then DG budget uses even terminology called acknowledged requests. So DG budget is paying well God, saying these payments could wait. We cut it down, but it's also 17.4 billion. And with draft amended budget, it came to 12.3 billion. So the gap between commitment and payment growing, and as I mentioned, as a result, you need to monitor permanently cash flow, because you have you can't come in the situation where you have no money to pay. And it is a bit of a challenge that is completely new. And additionally, you lose part of the resources, because if you can't make payment and you have for some research project, and I can't cover your expenses, so basically you need to lay still. You can't continue because you have no money, you have no cash. So in a way, it is not only just reputationally, but it's actually damages the product it's delivered, and it's need to be sold. It's need to be sold, even if I said the figure in itself, well, you can live with this, but it is getting more and more as an issue, and it was never to such a scale before. But it will go through each and every year. As usually, there is some budget management needed, and it is carryovers, so from one year to another, amending budgets for different reasons, and I will mention for 2013, and transfers. Just to get you flavor, what is amending budgets about? Because in Latvia, they are very lucky. They just adopt, and basically the budget adopted allows government a flexibility, and they don't need to go to Parliament second time, actually. It's one-off, so they're genius. In EU, it's not the case, each time you go. And for example, 2013, the first amending budget was accession of Croatia. Because it comes in the middle of the year, you need to come with a money. Second, increase in the forecast of other revenue. As I told, the fines at some stage you can really budget in. So it was a second, it's pleasant in a way. Third, 220 surplus, because you need to establish what surplus you have and you carry for the next year. And again, you need to make it budget. Number 4, modifications for different agencies. You basically played, well, from one budget line to another, but again used. 5th, solidarity fund because of floods. I think it was somewhere in Balkans. 6th was a revision of forecast of own resources, because you need for budget exact figures. So, and as forecasts need to be changed, again you go. 7, adjustments related to MFF 2014-2020, because in 2013 you needed. That's also an interesting story. During the MFF discussion, you would say, well, wait a minute, budget 2013, what it has to do with 2014-2020? When you try to find the balance, there was a challenge, if I recall, with France and some other countries. And they said, well, if you find solution now, we will vote for MFF. So basically, you came back to 2013 budget and in a way provided the compensation, well, it's not exact compensation, but political tool that some countries agree on budget 2014-2020. And I think it was related to some expenses in agriculture as usually, but you have some price to pay that not exactly sometimes comes in 2014-2020 budget. 8 was the most difficult. As I mentioned, it related to its outstanding payment needs, because Commission saw that we could not cover a year with a payment appropriation we had. And the 9 budget again was solidarity fund for help of some of the member countries that were being, I think, was forest fires or something like this. So basically, you have permanently, it's permanent process, and each time you go, all the questions actually are open. So the people that deal budget, I say, they are never really very much, I would say, sleeping. Accounts and payments, there is no particular, basically accounts are through treasuries and central banks as usually, and commercial banks. I think member countries need to credit an account, EU account, twice a month, a year, so there is particular rules for this, and it functions reasonably well. Most of the payment definitely goes through the commercial banks, but it's nothing particular. On accounting framework, what I could say, Commission use since 2005 accrual-based accounting. If I understand correctly, it is how you register the revenues and expenses. It's a bit different type of why it's better than cash accounting. Don't ask me, but it is more modern. But for me, well, as a private person, I would say cash accounting is definitely better, easier to understand. But that's how it goes. And Commission use international public sector accounting standards. And there is definitely general accounts with financial statements and budgetary accounts, and then we will come to budget discharge procedure. So in a way, it's rather well managed. There is extremely important documents that need to be followed. It's so-called financial regulation, because budget should be implemented according to financial regulation. That defines the rules how the money could be spent. And that also limits the flexibility. Sometimes people say that Commission or EU are very slow. But the answer is change financial regulation. Because you need to follow the exact letter, not only the spirit of financial regulation. And it is really a rule. Because if you break it, you make an error, and it is quantified by Court of Audit, and that is not exactly 100% crime, but it's close to the crime. So basically, the flexibility of EU funds, the red line is financial regulations. There is no way how you could avoid it. But otherwise, I would say no particular challenges. There is one issue that I would like to draw your attention. It is issue that is very much related on the changes of the spirit of the EU funds. It is results that you would like to achieve. It's rather new approach on public finance sector, because classically EU institutions have been judged how well they spend the money. Well, not how well, that they spend the money. You need to spend 100% of credits, payment credits. If you have not, you have done bad job. I mentioned that during the Christmas time, we made the biggest payment in development cooperation. You need to kind of end the budget with 100%. So if you managed to spend your money, you have been good. If you have not, member states are upset because they have provided you finance and you have not used. They would be kept to use themselves. So that's why it was permanent struggle. I mentioned that it is changing, but it is changing also on the result. And the result measurement is rather difficult. For example, Erasmus, you would say, well, fantastic results. 3 million students from 33 countries. Well, fine. 300,000 university staff have participated. The second result for me, and what? Is it good or bad? Is it right measurement? I would doubt it. On the European Regional Development Fund, 400,000 jobs created. Good? Question, what quality of jobs? I would like to see more analysis, how stable, or have been created for one day, or it is what other criteria. The easiest is definitely for infrastructure. You can definitely say how many kilometers of roads. That's, in a way, is easy, but you should actually say, and what? You would say, you build another 10 kilometers of road, congratulations. Is somebody driving on this road? And that's, again, the challenge, because you know the stories about airports being built, never used. Well, money was spent. Jobs have been created during the period, but it was never used. And I think it's, again, would be perhaps the best measurement I could imagine is impact on GDP. I still would ask that, I think, how GDP have changed and how the employment rates have changed. Because otherwise you can cut the forest in too many trees. And I think that's the challenge that is. But I believe this process will be continued in development cooperations. They adopted now results framework, in my opinion, with too many indicators. It's too complex still, but it is a learning curve, and I believe it's absolutely necessary that each and every country could justify to its citizens as well what we have achieved with the money we provided. It is something that need to be. Well, headline is rather clear: limited budget, no increase of budget in foreseeable future, very clear financial framework is being agreed. And also for next, as I said, I don't expect substantial change. 1.23 of GNI, and even if we are lower with the payments, was not even challenged by European Parliament. And if European Parliament even doesn't challenge this, that means there is no way that there will be substantial increase. And there comes a difficulty. If there is a real challenge inside the EU, and you know with Greece, for example, there is no community funds to deal with. With all the billions that I mentioned, we need to mobilize money from member countries. The same with Ukraine crisis. If you see the Russian press sometimes, they are a bit ironic, saying, well, 1.8 billion you gave, but the needs are in tens, on 20s, on hundreds billions. Well, you can't help Ukrainians more. Actually, we can't, because our framework is very prescribed. We can't change it rapidly because it's required ratification, and that means that the EU need to use different tools, basically mobilize member state money through intergovernment to address the major crisis. And that's what also happened now with issues with Greece. It's member countries that actually is more driving it, because each of them will need to come to the parliament and say, we need more money to support Greece. And it's not that you can take from the community funds. And the last, as I mentioned, result, essential to maximize leverage of each euro spent at the EU level. And that requires something that in this budget we have not been too successful. I mentioned for the external relations, how many instruments we have. And in my opinion, it is a bit of waste of money, because you get particular situation. Again, I will illustrate on the issue on development cooperation. If you would look statistic, what the EU provided aid in particular country, you will find different figures. And you say, well, how it could be? They don't know what the figures they spent. One explanation will be sometimes you use particular year, it is payment credits or commitment credits. That will explain. But there will be another one, because each of the administration group works with particular instruments. So there is country like, let's take Guinea. There is a people that works with European Development Funds. So they spend money from European Development Fund. There is a people that work from stability instruments. They will spend from this money. There is a people that work from the instrument for human rights. And they spend it. And it's never come together. It's basically you have a instrument-based philosophy. And the question is, wait a minute, does it matter which instrument make an impact? It's a whole money that you spend supporting the country makes a difference. And we tried this process, but it's extremely, extremely difficult, because each instrument has its particular legal base. Each instrument has particular accountability, and as a result, it did not match. And the same is also with all different type of instruments, because if I see EU money, does it matter that support comes from the structural funds or it comes from the Horizon 2020? At the end of the day, all they should provide the same development. And it is still very difficult to separate the instrument basis with the impact on the ground. And I believe that is something that still will need to be worked upon. On expenditure structure, there is no particular surprise. As I mentioned, yearly budget, common agriculture policy down, cohesion policy up, other policies up. It will be continued like this. Here is a good illustration why different member countries have very different perception about EU budget and relation. I think the most interesting is actually what the member countries get in GNIs from EU budget, this type of graph. And you can see that, for example, Lithuania is here. Where is Latvia? Sorry, Latvia. Here. Poland. And now look down. France. Germany. UK. So you clearly see that some countries have more interest in EU budget and some has by far less, because it is money that comes back from the EU for implementation different policies. So it means that different countries get extremely different return from the EU budget, because the measurement and GNI is quite correct. If there is not so good light, but you can clearly see that also it's very different instruments give different revenues for the countries. If you take Poland, the main money comes from the cohesion, but there is quite also money coming from agriculture. If you take France, well, cohesion not big deal, agriculture is big deal. And you can go in this, and this is a real challenge because national debate, a lot of countries see only expenses. They don't see the revenues. That's why, for example, for the structural funds, there was a need really to establish also support to developed regions. Because you would say, what's the point? Support the region where GDP per capita is more than 90%. Because otherwise, member countries, at least on political level, see that they don't get anything back from EU. 0.01% of GNI if you cut like this. And the other ones, well, they are more happy. But they won't like to come down. And I remember the debate in Latvia on the direct payments. Direct payments for Latvia get per hectare the last of it. And everybody would recognize that it's not fair. Latvia should get more. It's a question, who would like to give away his part? Because at the end of the day, you have the same box, and basically, to be more just, you need to take away from more richer or who gets more to give to more poor. In principle, everybody agrees until the moment when you really need to do this. And that, I think, is one of the issues that you would say in long term, it was thorns that I mentioned. If you don't increase overall support for EU policies, you have a problem. Because then these are fighting to keep the peaks, these are fighting to get up. And it's a too bloody fight. So it basically would be better to get more money and increase these up, and these could stay where they are. But then you need more money from member countries coming from own resource decision. And this is at this stage not working. Politically, it is a big issue, but the good news, if you have MFF, for 7 years, it's forgotten, more or less. When it comes, so it's remembered only when the financial framework discussions are, and then you strike a compromise, not very logical compromise, but still compromise to continue. And I have no doubt that it would be done. This is not particularly different. You clearly see that for budget 2015, 145, and you see that their overall figure is only 46% for competitiveness. But it's the first year of the financial perspective, of second year, and it will permanently grow because financial framework figures have been slightly different, but not too much. You see for 6% for administration, 6% for global Europe. For security and citizenship, it will be growing during the year, and for agriculture will basically go down, as anticipated by financial perspective. So it's very predictable tendency, but basically confirms what we have talked about. For 2015, where the money will go, particularly, one is employment initiative. I believe it's really extremely important measure for EU, where unemployment in the youth is enormous. I still believe that it's not only monies that need to be changed, because it's very different employment levels for youth in the EU. If I see Germany and Austria, unemployment level for young people is basically on the same level as general. If I go to Spain and Greece, it's devastating. So it's a problem with education system as well. But it's always a problem with the first job. As I graduated from this university in the time where you have been sent to work, so I have had never real challenge for the first job. But as I have also children, I remember how nervous until you get your first job. Because when you have first job, you have social security number, you have work experience. The first job is a challenge even if you are excellent, because who knows that you are excellent? You have no proven track record. And I believe this money is really needed to give the first job chance, because you can create a tax incentive or support, whatever support you have, that employer gives you a chance. Okay, you decide later to go, or you decide you need to do something else, but you have this first job. For me, I think it's very crucial in market economy for young people to give the first job experience. And then, well, it's up to them really to follow. So I believe this is really good. European aid to most deprived. Well, that's something new, and I don't know if it should be on the European level. It's really, there is a poverty in the EU is growing. So it's not only, well, gap between rich and poor is growing, but also social exclusion and desperation. And these European funds, actually, it is anticipated to support activities against it. My opinion, it is not necessary on European level. I would say it's national countries should deal with this. I know that European money could perhaps help for some of the programs, but with 0.7 billion, you can't do miracles in the EU. It should be by far more dealt with the countries, because it's up to them really to support the social inclusion. It's also against social competitiveness, small and medium. This figure I would wish more. Actually, I would like to basically put money there and try to really to create more competitiveness. You would say, why small and medium-sized enterprises can't be supported from national funds? Well, I think it's easy to, it's rather easy to justify increase of social expenses in the parliament. Because if you speak that poor people need support, everybody will be agreeing. It's by far more difficult to give money for entrepreneurship, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises. Recently, Latvian local Court of Audit, Valsts Control, came with rather devastating report on the support for small and medium-sized enterprises. What they said, well, 1/3 of these enterprises went bankrupt. Well, if you use this argument, guys, you should look what is entrepreneurship, and well, it's unfortunately it's the case. You can't expect that each enterprise created will survive. And from budgetary purpose, I understand why they came this. They said, well, you should better use money for social programs, because then you could justify each euro and no one would go bankrupt. And I think European program could really to provide the financing through the banks for small and medium-sized enterprises, because politically it's easier to defend this measure on European level, but on national level you have an audit saying, well, the enterprise that you supported went bankrupt. If it was normal bankruptcy, what can you do? But instead you have perhaps 2 or 3 enterprises that are continuing their activities, giving employment and paying taxes. So that's why I believe this program deserves more money. About youth employment initiative, I already said, it is really something that is new, and I think should be continued. And the last slide, it is accountability or discharge. If I compare with my native country, actually we have not very clear discharge procedure. Because European treaties, European Union treaties, very clear describe discharge procedure. Because if I am spending commissioner, I mean spend money, I have a political responsibility until Parliament released me from it. And in European level, it happens rather, I think, in rather correct forms. There is a court of audit that takes a sample in development spending or structural funds. It's based on methodology that you can perhaps challenge, but basically very sound methodology. And then they get an error rate. It's not the money that is lost to corruption, but the money that is spent not accordingly to financial regulation. For example, you have not all the documents that need to justify the payment, or it's payment after the deadline, or whatever. And then you have magical figure 2%. If you are under 2%, it's accepted that basically system functions well. If you are over 2%, you need, well, to be fired. That is one option, but it's towards the Parliament to decide. Or you need to prove that you will improve your control system that will bring down the error rate. And I think it's rather fair and correct, because there is a balance between costs of managing system and controlling system and the result on the ground. You should not try to expect that there will be no errors whatsoever. But you need really to have system in place to achieve reasonably low error rate. And the court's methodology basically provides it. But there is one very big disagreement between Commission and Court of Audit on this. And this is rather, I would say, dialectical difficulty. Court audits all on the yearly basis, but the programs are multi-annual. Because at the end of the day, if something in the system has not worked, I still have the last payment because I could not deliver it, or I could also request repayment. So I could still correct the error. Court does not see it as that because they work on an annual basis. So usually what comes up is that court claims, in Commission opinion, higher error rate than actually will come. And for development, we have a so-called residual error rate study, definitely in agreement with the court, where we analyzed what would be impact by private auditing company if you take annual cycle on it. And definitely error rate was lower, but still was somewhere 3%. So it was not good enough, and the Court of Audit was very happy because our claim that we improve at the end by below 2% was not substantiated. So in a way, court was right, because court not exactly insisted 2 or 3%, but it should be the dynamic in some way. You would say, okay, and court has done, and what about it? Well, unfortunately, then commissioners are called to Budget Control Committee. And this is, I think, the most toughest bodies that I have ever seen. So MEPs, they don't care what you have done with the money, basically. They care what errors you made. They talk Court of Audit reports, and there's also whistleblowers, and it is the hardest hearing you can get ever, because why you have not looked at, where are your controls in place, why these errors have been made, And you can't say, well, wait a minute, this is a difficult country. In this country, we can't establish exactly, it's not, well, it's war-torn. No, you should have done it. And at the end of the day, you are at the mercy of the parliament. Or they accept what you have said, or they basically say, you should be fired. Well, for individual commissioners, until now, they have not come to this conclusion, but the whole commission collapsed, Santer's commission, on this basis. So it means that there is, in my opinion, even very tough, but still extremely good scrutiny from European Parliament. So my idea when I spend, please don't make an error. Another issue is a fraud. Fraud issue is something that, at least when I dealt with development financing, we have not money lost to the fraud. Why we have not lost? Well, it's an extreme control procedure. This 0.2% that we see, it comes for structural funds or common agricultural policy payments on member state level. Is this 0.2% high or low? I would say it's high. It should be zero, because you can lose, well, you can be criticized for errors, but fraud is not acceptable in principle. And there is a body called OLAF. It's not very transparent, I would say, and does not comply by any of commissioners. So we have a bit of challenge with this, and it is, if compared with this country, there is a body called CNAB, it is a Corruption Prevention Bureau. They live their own life. And I would mention an example, not with me, but Commissioner Solbes. There was suspicion of fraud in Eurostat. It was, I think, 10 years ago. And it was still under investigation whatsoever. And definitely Olaf didn't report to Commissioner. Because they are completely independent, they would like to influence. As a result, somehow it leaked that there have been a fraud. Parliament called Commissioner and said, why didn't you know that there is a fraud in the office? He said, how you should know? No, it's Commissioner's responsibility to know. Because Olaf does, it's completely independent, it does not share with the Commissioner. So you're always in a fear that there is corruption going, case investigation going, that you don't know, but Parliament never accepts it, and this is still need to be found a way. I think the same also with the Corruption Prevention Bureau. It should be independent, no question about it, but how the links with political responsibility should be established is still need to be found, because at the end of the day, it's not normal that political responsible for the Parliament, it is Commissioner, does not know what's going on. He should be aware, okay, what measures he could take if the investigation is going is different, but still he should be aware. Why Olaf is doing this? Well, they would like to avoid any leaks, because they expect if you more share information, more leaks. So fight against corruption, I would say, is going with very strong body, but unfortunately we have slightly political problem. And if you follow, there was a case of one of my former colleagues, Commissioner Dalli. It was a case that is still, I think, ongoing and pending. The basis was that there was a suspicion that one of the Maltese businessmen asked from Swedish company with snuff, if you know this, what snuff is, I never tried, but I think it's something they put under the lip, yeah? And it's not very popular from the health reasons in European bureaucracy. He claimed that he could arrange with his commissioner that Swedes' case would be dealt with. So Swedes complained to anti-corruption body. So far, fine. And then anti-corruption body write a report that basically said that there is no proven that commissioner has never heard about it. So basically they said, we can't exactly guarantee that he did not know about this person making this proposal. There was no proof whatsoever. And that's why I'm saying the case is going, commissioner is fighting for his honor, actually, because I fully believe that he's innocent, but Olaf report did not blame him, but this also did not wash him whitewash. Commission president could not do anything else than ask the commissioner to resign. Because if you have the doubt about corruption, there is you can't survive. So basically, Dali was a victim. Of whom? Well, of this fight against corruption. So it is collateral damage in a way, but it was very painful for him, and I believe the president did the right thing, but it's still going on. So I think it's always the challenges with anti-corruption bodies, or on national level, or international level, really to find the right balance between transparency and accountability from one side and efficiency of fighting corruption. So for me, Olaf is doing an excellent job, and I have never had the slightest, but I understand this political risk, and I never slept well when I was commissioner for development, because I did not know what to expect, and then you are caught in parliament and accused of ignorance. That's the worst thing politician could do after the misleading the parliament. So that's why I believe that there is some improvements are needed. And Olaf is not managed by any political figure. It's really administrative figure. There is no president or whoever responsible for Olaf, so it's doing its job completely independently. That allows them to do a lot, but it is a challenge. The last issue that I would speak on budget, it is just to give you flavor of DG budget activities in the short time that I was there. DG budget basically is there are four main units. One is dealing, I would say, the biggest part with expenditure. What was, say, duties during, the challenges during that time? First, they needed to prepare draft budget for 2015, so it is a bit of challenge. Second, they needed to prepare this amending budget for 2014, requesting additional payment appropriations for the budget. So rather unpopular with the parliament, with the council. And the last, budgeting the surplus at the end of the year. So it's basically amending budgets and new budget amendments. Second big directorate is own resources and financial programming. So they have just finished this own resources legislative package, but they don't need return each year. Then they have preparing Commission working document on the calculation of UK rebate, because it's a rather technical process, but sometimes the excess is political. Third, that they needed to do technical adjustment of the MFF for the year 2015, and they also do with public internal control, so the internal control, how resources collect. I would say, I would not mind to be director in this director, never in the first one. In this, perhaps, why not? Third is treasury and budgetary execution. What their task was to monitor cash flow and forecasting, because you need to call member countries to provide the money, because Commission has not budget put in account. You all the time need to mobilize budget for the expenses. So that means that you need basically, you have no reserve, you all the time need to manage cash flow. That is, and then they need also advance of own resources called from member states for minimizing deficit of payment appropriations. So that means that they really need to try to establish the cash flow is in the right time, in the right quantity for particular payments to make, and that means that very clear cooperation with line DGs. Then they have also responsibility for closure of 2013 accounts and audit. So they provide provisional accounts, first of all, then they give them to European Court of Audit, and then final accounts for the adoption of the Commission. And then they need also to do something, if somebody is interested, so-called communication on the protection of EU budget. Because, as I mentioned, you need to establish a recovery order. And that sometimes is rather challenges. For example, you have made a payment for the company that at the end of the day did not provide what you have expected by quality. In the meantime, company went already bankrupt. So what you do? You need to write it off as a losses or try to find another. Or you need to find amicable solution with a company that if they pay all the money that you basically owe to you, then you have a difficulty that they could never operate again. So it is rather political issue. It's not too many cases in my practice in 10 years, but each of these cases have been extremely sensitive, because normally you say, if they owe us money, they should pay 100%. So recovery should be 100%, but sometimes you should be, how to say, more ready for compromise, because if you are very ambitious, you get 0. If you are less ambitious, you get 90 or 80 or 50%. So it is a balance, but I think Parliament would always like clear scrutiny on this, that there is not some mismanagement. And for some also where commitments have been terminated, withdrawal of EU funding for ineligible projects. And the fourth is Central Financial Service. It's they are trying to change financial regulation when it's necessary. For example, during my time in office, public procurement they change. And this is where I believe Commission has advancing compared with the country I now know best, because in Latvia public procurement is not efficient because it's too detailed anymore. So it's nightmarish. If you need to call for competition for each time when you need a travel insurance for somebody going, I would say it's overkill. It's really overkill. Some trust in system is needed, because otherwise you are really making public procurement such a headache that better not to apply, or it's so difficult to manage that you make an error rate. So you need to make then more stuff. So I think it's at the end of the day, you end up or providing worse service, or you spend more than it's necessary for your human resources. So I believe Commission has done quite important change in this. There also have been some changes because of European political parties. I don't recall exactly what it was. And then they work with financial agreement with external partners. What I mentioned, 7% of money we implement through the partners, international partners like World Bank, United Nations, so-called FAFAs with the EIB, World Bank, and also they write an activity report. So that's why I would like to finish on the statement from the first commissioner, not first, the British commissioner, that it is boring, unimportant, and small beer. It's not actually justified. It is, well, not the most challenging file, agreed, but it's extremely important, and it's not small beer. It's definitely a big meal, I would say, because if this part of community machinery is not working, everything collapses. So that's why it's not spectacular, but it is important, and political role of the commissioner, for budget commissioner, definitely is, has increased enormously. At the same time, I also should put a caveat, because a budget commissioner should have very close relationship with Commission President, because Commission's President's biggest tool actually is implementation of the budget. So it means that Commission's President's role in budgetary processes, I think, are higher even than Prime Minister's impact on Latvian budgetary procedures. So that's very clear what I have seen in the year. So I could stop here, and for the remaining part, I would be happy to hear your questions concerning what I talked today, but any other EU issue. I just give examples, or it is financial problems with Greece, or UK request to renegotiate a treaty, or it is issues related to the Eastern Partnership Summit, or any other issue that you would like to relate to European affairs, and I will try to answer according to my information and my knowledge.
Okay, then we have around 15 to 20 minutes of questions. We will use microphone for the purposes of recording. When you ask a question, please present yourself shortly, with the name and institution. So, first question.
My name is Vlad and I'm from the European Studies Master Program, and my question is regarding the budget. I'm wondering if, do you have an opinion if there is a possibility for the future that within the European Union we could move from this system where we are creating the creditor countries and the debitor countries, the system where the Commission would not only propose the budget but could actually govern the budget more by having the mandate to be given own right for taxation, like on greenhouse gas or the corporate tax, so that in order that Commission can have actually its own money in order to provide the budget to the member states. Thank you.
Well, there is this Monti group. Monti group is definitely trying very much to work in the direction what you described, trying to change our own resource basis to be more independent in a way. From other point of view, the ones that will be against it would say, wait a minute, GNI is also called own resource, even if it comes directly from treasuries from member countries. Well, at the end of the day, it's collected by the taxes. So my opinion will be that there is no big changes to be expected. And arguments would be saying, well, anyhow, we don't expect communities tax service. It will stay Latvian tax service, British, German, etc. So implementation, whatever taxation you make, goes through the national tax collection. So as a result, what is the difference? Part of this tax that we collect give to you, or we give from GNI resource. So it will be extremely difficult to convince member countries to move to this. I personally would favor this, because if I would try to explain to European citizens, for me, it would be easier to depend saying it's 2% of value-added tax that we collect and we spend for European programs, than to say, well, we try to work for a key and get from each country some contributions through GNI key. For me, I think it changes not only just a mass, but also the logic of the exercise. So I would be very much in favor, but it's more political consideration. It's not so much technical consideration, because technically it's correct. Whatever mechanism you use, at the end of the day, it is coming from national treasury to the EU, and there will be no EU tax inspector knocking at your door saying, let me in, I would like to collect European tax. So it will never come to this. But I don't anticipate that this point of view will win. Partially, with experience we have provided for this proposal for financial transaction tax. And it was very cold reception from member countries, extremely cold reception, because new tax is rather easy, say 10% for EU, 90% for us. No, it was never really seriously debated, and I think at the end of the day we will end own resource, traditional own resources, perhaps abolition at some stage VAT tax, because it's playing only 9%. Does it really matter? And then GNI based own resource with some type of compensation mechanism for some countries. For compensation mechanism, I believe there will be big debate, because at the end of the day, the system is not defined saying what means just retour, what is means to say it's honest, what is percentage of honesty, because should be each country getting at least 0.02% or being not below particular balance. How you measure it? It's not only financial flow, as I said. It is, well, the EU has a liberty, free movement of goods, persons, capital, and and services. So it's not so easy to measure. I think that will be always this challenge, because some countries would claim they need to get more rebate, and some would say it's not fair because actually you get more. I could claim, just to give example, a lot of Latvians are working in UK. Okay, fine. But Latvia spends the money for training these people. So it's actually, we would need that UK gets less rebate or we get more, because actually we provided the expenses and UK economy is growing. Is it fully correct? Well, you could argue, perhaps you find some argument, other argument, but at least I have a point in this, saying, well, wait a minute. The same you can also argue now with this issue with migration policy. Is the Commission formula correct? I would say it's a good formula, rather simple what they provide, how to distribute people from Italy and Greece to others. But wait a minute. There was an operation in Central African Republic. Latvians participated in it. It costed us money as well, and also politics, and you can't measure with money life of your people going there, providing peace and security. Has this operation made an impact on the migration? Yes, it made, because people are more safe. They don't need to run to escape their life. So actually, it was a huge contribution to migration limitation. But will it be accepted? Well, it's at the end of the day, you need to get agreement from both parts. So I think on the correction mechanisms, there will be a lot of debate. I hope it will make at least more transparent, but I have limited hopes, because it's always easier to sleep on existing compromise than to create a new compromise in politics.
Other questions? Well, not I myself have few. If you one of them, then I would ask, and then you again. It's rather technical, but still interesting based on the recent example of Riga summit, the decision to for this 1.8 billion euros to Ukraine. So my technical question is, where does this money come from? Has it been foreseen in advance? And the second part of the question is, what is it actually that they discuss in this meeting? Are they discussing how much can we give? Are they discussing where do we take the money from? What is the agenda of discussion for giving this money?
Yeah, for 1.8 billion, it is foreseen in the budget. There was not for Ukraine, for macroeconomic support. That's close to the ceiling that Commission could mobilize for next 7 years, something like this. And what the Commission did, it made a front loading, so-called. So basically, it would be divided between different years, but you put in one and you needed to increase the cash flow for a particular year, but it is nothing mobilized beyond this, because Commission could spend only money that it has in the budget. It could request some changes in the budget, but normally member countries would never agree. So it was the figures that I knew already from the time when first time Ukrainian crisis came out. That was the limit that Commission could have provided. So now all the procedures has come to the end. And also I think was important that Ukraine has now capacity to absorb, because you can give money only if you are fully aware that public finances are in order. And with the new minister, it's excellent news. Basically, people believe that public finance system is sound. So I think that's a good news. What you discuss in Eastern Partnership Summit, if I have understood correctly, well, it was not pledging conference. So, and it did not deal with Ukraine only. So it dealt with all Eastern Partnership countries. And what debate is definitely more political. What Eastern Partnership countries are expecting from the EU, and it is more visa freedom, more trade links, and from the EU, it is an issue what we can provide and what we think about it. But it's not exactly about money. I would agree that it would be better to focus on money, because money is something very concrete at the end of the day. But if you see the countries, well, do Belarus need support from the EU financially? They would always be happy to take. I would say no need. Even for Ukraine, without this crisis and the war, I would say Ukraine basically don't need, in my opinion, financial support from the EU. For Moldova, it's different. I would say for Armenia, it's different. For Azerbaijan, its GDP per capita is high enough. So it's very different, and money is definitely not the only instrument, but there is a lot of political debate, and this particular summit was definitely dominated with situation in Ukraine. So it's more political debates than really financial discussion. Just to give another example, they have been pledging conference, if I understand, for Central African Republic in Brussels yesterday, and that's, or day before yesterday, and that's mostly about money, how much money you put, where you invest. So it's a completely different type of exercise. But for Eastern Partnership, it will never exactly be this, because countries are not on the levels that you would say financial impact or support is a main element of stability or growth in these countries.
Thank you. Just the last question for me. I just read 2 weeks ago, you mentioned Olaf, and that the employees, the officials from Olaf, were raiding Gazprom's offices in Poland due to the process regarding the anti-competitiveness law. And my question is, can we expect more money coming to the budget based on fines, or can we expect more deterioration of relations and new tensions between Russia and the Union? Thank you.
I think it's not Olaf that has been in Gazprom offices. It was competition authority. And competition authority, it's not about fraud. Competition authority is looking about, well, artificial high price, limiting, well, basically working about against EU competition rules. There was investigation going, I think, already for 3 years, and Commission decided to move to next steps. They had sent a reasoned opinion to the Gazprom to answer that there is real breach of the competition from the Gazprom. Gazprom has now chance to answer saying, well, your accusations are false, and we could justify it. So I think it is this time. For Gazprom, I would be very much surprised if it would be Olaf, because Gazprom does not get community money. So Olaf is not working on this. If Gazprom has broken the law in Poland, it will be prosecutors or investigation office of Polish. It would not be Olaf. Olaf comes only when EU money is being used. So it is competition authority. So do we expect money to come? Well, all competition authority activities are not about collecting money. They are just finding the companies, and I mentioned, for example, Microsoft, and I could mention a lot of others, for the reason that, well, if you broke the rule in market economy, you should pay the only instrument that market economy understands, it's money, so that you don't have temptation to do this again. So I think that's how it is. About Gazprom, it's too early to say if the case will close with a fine, or Gazprom will prove that whatever they did was completely accordance to the EU rules. And I would not exclude that the Gazprom could provide enough arguments. I believe that Commission has, because of this raids that you mentioned, has collected some evidence about some practices that are against EU competition law, but as usually in gas area, well, it will be not so easy to prove. There is no final conclusions yet, and even if they will be done, there is still appeal possibilities, so it will be a case that will be going for 4 years before, if any, money will come from Gazprom fine. What you ask, will there be political reaction? I would judge yes, but the first reaction from Gazprom and Russia has been extremely extremely, well, I would say, matter of fact. They said, what a nonsense it is. We will respond. There is no case whatsoever that we misbehave. So that's what they said. They did not say anything about politics, and not, they reacted very, I would say, matter of fact, and perhaps they have good arguments to do so. So far it was never politicized. I hope it will not stay, but if it will come to the fine, I doubt that a lot of people would avoid temptation to say that it's political. Because I think Barroso had, in early time, with Russian president, he mentioned indirectly saying, well, in EU is a competition practices, and we have fine Microsoft, Gazprom could have the same. So it was not taken as a just, well, colloquial. It was taken very seriously as a, well, some type of threat. So it is, we will later work quite a lot to calm situation down, but it was never mentioned. It just said, well, EU rules are EU rules. You need to respect them. So, so let's see how it will. I hope that at the end of the day, interest on both sides to come the amicable solution. And I hope that DG Competition and Gazprom or will clarify, or they will come to the agreement that will not very make high political waves. At least I would not like it. I would like to say that it's gas is any other. It's really it's business, and in business things sometimes happen that we should not tolerate, but we should not try also to make a big political stories out of them.
Any more questions? We have time for a few. No? Yes, you do. Not there. Eva?
Hi, Eva, European Studies student. Well, maybe a few questions related. One, how you evaluate Latvia as presiding country? For now, maybe some positives, some challenges. Opinion related to Britain and Brexit, or maybe also Iceland? That's shortly.
I think the first is easier because Latvia definitely has done, I would say it's already over in a way, because even if still months to go, excellent presidency. I think it's one of the best, well, you usually say that when the president ends that it's the best ever, but I would say it's really has done fantastically from all points of view, because administration has done an excellent job in Brussels and at home, trying to create a compromises. It was very well organized, very well structured. The only drawbacks that I could make, it was over-ambitious in my opinion. So many events I have never seen during any presidency ever. So I think it was a bit of overkill. But as long people are alive, well, okay, they are definitely overworked. But no, for me, that is extremely challenging because it's a lot of work for limited administration, and people should be exhausted. And it is long presidency because you have real 6 months. In the second, there is Christmas and other parts. So I think that's the only drawback I could say, and I will always also continue to say that it was so good that it can't be better or not. Saying said this, they definitely EU is not depending only on successful presidencies. There are political issues that are emerging. I think for me the main challenging issue is migration. I would say it's number one, because migration comes now well with these quotas that in my opinion is not the right way forward. Not the right way. I'm not saying that it is wrong how you calculate, but you can't force any independent country to do this, because you create something that people later would say, or even at that moment say, wait a minute, we are ready to do things, but we will do by our own will, but not that we are forced to do. I think that is something that could create a lot of challenges, but I also see that the whole migration issue is providing for a lot of disturbance of our mind, our finance, and also increased security risks. First of all, by a lot of people from ISIS or similar organization being smuggled in the EU, and with, again, with trafficking of human beings, increasing the finance for international terrorism. So I see it's enormously challenging issue, because the answer is actually prosperous country on other side of Mediterranean. And how you can speak about prosperous country if there's civil war in Syria? How you can speak about also successful countries if it's still Somalia is torn apart, even it's improved. If you see in Eritrea people running away. So it's extremely challenging subject, and it's long-term issue, and there should be very, I would say, good cooperation between member countries that never have been, I would say, it should come to cooperation never seen before inside the EU. Are we capable to raise to this challenge? I hope, but I don't know. I don't know that is. On Greece issue, it's also unpredictable. I understand the new Greek government, because you come in the office with election pledge. When you're in the office, you see, well, it's not exactly as I has said to my voters. And how you make a balance between. To make things worse, it connects with other member countries, because support for Greece's budget comes from the member countries, including also Latvia. And if I see the level of pensions and level, I would say, years of retirement, it will be very difficult to me to say that we provided support to Greece and our social standards are by far lower. It's not so easy. You can perhaps manage, but you should say, well, they are making also enormous effort. But I believe it's not only for us, but for others. So I think there is a challenge. On top of it, there was never a situation where any country has, well, any doubts about, well, has come to non-payment. I believe that we will not come to this. We know that there is a lot of speculation about 5th of June, repayment of IMF loan. I hope that Greece will have enough money, and I hope that Greece will provide the reform package sufficient to get additional support. But Greece issue is long-term issue, and I would say it's not only Greece issue. In my opinion, Greeks have the challenge that my country has. We are at the periphery of the European Union. We have all the challenge that most economic activities are more or less like everywhere central located. If I see Latvia, we have inside Latvia Riga that is growing and everything else is going down. So you can't, you see the same on the small country level, and the EU is, in my opinion, no different. So that's why I'm speaking about structural funds, structural policies, because these instruments could provide for the additional support really to get enough growth in economy and to keep decent social standards. So for Greece, I would say I am worried, but I believe it's doable compared with migration issue. And then the issue about UK that comes during the presidency now, I think this will be the easiest issue, because at the end of the day, neither EU countries, except you would like that the UK leaves, and I believe UK won't like to leave. So at the end of the day, you need to find the good ground that Cameron comes to his voters and says, this is agreement that perhaps is not perfect, but I believe that the best interest of both UK and EU, and he will get positive vote. So there I am less worried. It definitely depends on level of ambition, but I don't see it as a toxic or difficult issue. Because in today's debate, I mentioned, for example, all the UK debate issue. It started when they applied, then first before referendum they negotiated one deal that was good enough to put on referendum, but later again was not good, then was Margaret Thatcher coming, so it was permanent issue. So I think it's not very much surprising, but I don't see it as a really enormous issue for the EU, because I believe that it will be dealt with, and it will be, as Cameron says, good for UK, good for Europe, and there is also a new situation with UK that we need to take to account. More integration is coming in the Eurozone. UK is not part of Eurozone because they will not introduce Euro, at least for foreseeable future. So that means that we need to find a new way how UK could use its full potential, but at the same time not being part of Eurogroup. And that is a challenge, but it could be done if there is a goodwill from both sides, and I believe there will be. So for me, migration is definitely the biggest issues that we have internally. Plus, definitely Ukraine, but that is a bit more different type of story. I would say it's not just EU affair, it's also global affair, and it's also NATO security related affair. So it's broader issue, but I believe that's how I see EU. But in general, I would say I am very optimistic about EU. There is a limit. We clearly know the limits, where the budget is. We know where the treaty stands. I don't expect enormous changes but what it is, I think it's a rather sound basis, sometimes not very logical, but there is no threats that I would say today would really make a disbalance or a huge challenge. You can definitely speculate what happens if Marine Le Pen will be elected as a French president, but well, the probability that she will be elected, at least in my opinion, is not very high. I would say I doubt that she will be. Wilders will never be prime minister, I think, in Netherlands. Alternative for Deutschland is going down, so it's not some anti-European forces that are growing. And UKIP agenda, even before elections, changed slightly. It moved away from just anti-Europe. Well, there will never be Euro asking for the UK to stay in European Union. But I think their rhetoric also is changing. So there is no real political risk for disintegration, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Time flies fast. We are already a bit over time, so if there is any very short, burning, urgent question, not then with a big round of applause, we would like to thank you very much.
For you that have survived.
I thank students too, and I hope